Imagine if that head trash was not there. Who would you be? What if I told you those fears were no longer a problem? What would you do? I'm Stephanie Costello, a mom of 3, wife, and avid mountaineer. Beyond all of these, I am, very much like you, an average person trying to navigate this thing we call life. My goal with this podcast is to bring to light the truth about what intimacy really is. You may smile, feel called out, or learn something new. Either way, you will learn you are in control. This episode is brought to you by Safety in Freedom. Are you struggling to find safety in the freedom you create? Or maybe you're struggling to own your power, embrace who you are, and break free from those toxic patterns? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's figure out what is really happening in your relationships with yourself and others. You can do that for free today at safetyinfreedom.com/call. That is safetyinfreedom.com/call. In addition, if you are looking for support with what we've been talking about in today's episode, I want to encourage you to get our free tools to help you navigate your freedom. You can go now to safetyinfreedom.com to get those resources. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit theintimacykruths.com. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Nicole, who is an experienced family law and probate litigator, assisting clients in resolving their family crises in an efficient manner with empathy and compassion. Through thoughtful and tailored strategy, unique to client goals, and creative solutions to maximize family wealth and limit family turmoil, she works with self-employed individuals, business owners, business executives, attorneys, dentists, doctors, human resource professionals, and more. All right. Welcome to the Intimacy Truth podcast, where we have Nicole Forbes here to talk to us about the nice guy syndrome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners/viewers.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited because one, it's been a long time coming. Like, we've really been trying hard for this. And
Yes.
Two, this is such an important conversation to be having for people with people and for people who are needing like that really bigger understanding outside of their own kind of journey, right? You know, when you're stuck in the challenge, you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, somebody reach me in, help me out. And so I feel like this is going to be a great episode for people to really gain that awareness around what it might be to engage in a divorce or with a family law attorney. So I'm super excited about that.
Me too.
Yeah. So before we jump into the fun stuff, well, this is actually, I find this part very fun. So tell us more about when you decided you were going to be an attorney and what that looked like for you.
Yes. So I first decided that I wanted to be an attorney when I was 10. I was in 5th grade. And it started off kind of as something that got thrown to me in an assignment where we had a journal entry. We had to say what we wanted to do. I had these really big, lofty goals of essentially being Britney Spears, playing basketball in the WNBA, and my 5th grade teacher told me that was unrealistic, so I had to redo the assignment. And
that's what shame on my dreams, lady. You gave me this like prompt to like
yeah. I stopped growing, so the basketball thing probably wasn't going. Like, I've been the same height since then.
Oh, super
but so my friend was like, oh, well, you know, you like crime shows and you're smart, like maybe you could be a lawyer. And so it kind of was a light bulb moment, I guess, and kind of put me on this path. And as I got older, through middle school, through high school, and then certainly through college, certainly by the time that I was applying for colleges, I had an idea that I want to be an attorney. This is really what I want to do. And I think part of that had to do with the communities that I grew up in, being very community focused, community service focused. And I really felt that law in general was a place to help people. That's always kind of been something that's been pushed, in the different communities that I was involved in growing up, is doing something that will help people, that will serve others. Yeah. And kind of as I got older, that area of law refined itself, and probably by high school, I had landed on family law, knowing that would be a place that could probably do some good work, some help, help people. And now looking back on it, I did tend to always be that mediator, or someone who would stick up for other people, so to speak, in certain situations. So I think that's attracted me to family law as well. Kind of helping people put pieces together, and move forward, and try to be reasonable. Family law is that area where no one wins. So
Yeah.
it is a matter of kind of how is this family going to look and operate, in the future,
Yeah.
in separate households. If you're divorced, obviously it's something different
Right.
for other areas. And then, once I started to get into law school, and, I'm at Champney now, and that's I summered in law school, and then I got an offer to come back. So that's kind of where I've been, and it was a natural fit here in terms of where there was a need, and then there was also an extension to where I was interested, and it's kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, it's very cool. So I was actually going to ask you about the being a mediator. Like as a kid, everyone used to always tell me I'd be a good attorney, and the thought of it like stresses the shit out of me. Like I just can't handle the idea of the pressure being an attorney in a courtroom, but being the person that mediator in a different way. So tell me more about how you were a mediator as a kid, and how you feel that might have enhanced your skills in your relationships, and then as you became an attorney.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of three. So,
Yeah.
especially when I'm the babysitter for the afternoon, or the weekend, whatever it may be, kind of mediating between them. And I think I've always kind of presented myself in that role. I have probably countless stories of, when my brother and sister were old enough to also stay alone, like I would maybe, if our parents weren't around, ran out to the store or something when I was old enough to drive, and getting calls or texts from both of them, like, Tyler did this, Samantha did this, and being like, right, I'll be home, we'll figure it
Yeah.
out. That type of stuff. Certainly similar with friends as well.
Yeah.
When there was arguments and things like that, perhaps sometimes I was sticking my nose where it didn't belong.
Hey, we
In
all do
those
it.
situations, but
Yeah.
that's definitely something that I think friends have definitely acknowledged in me, as well as being a little bit of the mediator, and being the person that tries to get people to see the other side
And take the
of a,
action. The
yeah.
mediator's usually the one they're like, all right, we've mediated enough to the point where we got to take some action somewhere, or we're not going to get to any result. Even if nobody wins in the situation, there's still a result at some point. And so we kind of got to take our wins with our losses in the work that you do.
Yes, and I should probably qualify that. So I would love to be a family law mediator soon. The trainings here in New Hampshire have been a little bit delayed, so I don't actually mediate right now. Our firm
that's a legal term now, isn't it?
Yeah, so I thought about that. I was like, I should clarify. I participate in mediations all the time, representing clients, but in terms of being the person that's going back and forth to the rooms, I'm not quite there yet. But it's definitely a place that I think I want to end up. But that being said, kind of being the person that's working with other people, I think it's always important, especially the family law space, from a family and a legal perspective, that people are seeing the other side of the coin, kind of getting the perspective, getting that big picture in terms of how it fits their goals and moving forward.
Yeah.
So,
And to
you're
add
always
to your
on your attorney's side, but as an attorney, you're always on your client's side, but sometimes that means providing that extra perspective.
Right, exactly. And excuse me for I tend to do that sometimes because I thought you were done. But to add to the mediator piece is, it's not that you are being a mediator in your work. So for listeners, we're not talking about her being a mediator in her work. That's a different title, certification, whatever it is. We're talking about your communication skills and strengths in being able to mediate a conversation, not necessarily as an attorney. So I appreciate that you added that. And then while we're on this topic of disclaimers and clarifying, this is not to disconnect you from your attorney that you are working with, or if you're looking to work with an attorney, Nicole is definitely somebody that can answer your questions. But this entire recording is intended to bring light to the nice guy syndrome and what it looks like in your work, as well as how you help people if they get to a place where they're needing a separation or they're needing some other support. And we can even touch on other areas of family law, like estate planning is one of them, right?
So estate planning tends to be its own area, but there are places that overlap. And certainly if you're going through a divorce, divorce touches on so many different areas that even sometimes lawyers don't know, and estate planning can be one of those. But like
Okay.
prenup or postnuptial agreements,
Got it.
those tend to be where those two areas really collide,
Mm.
because you have to take consideration of things in both areas. And I
Mm.
appreciate the disclaimer, because lawyers, the small print, which I know will be in the show notes, general legal advice, no
Yeah.
attorney client,
Right.
relationships being established, no legal advice. But yeah, estate planning is definitely something that in that area falls under the umbrella. But certainly, there's a lot of dovetail there as well.
Awesome. I love it. And I kind of think now that we're talking, I coined it in the beginning, nice guy syndrome. I've said it a couple of times, but I kind of want to put like nice person syndrome, right? Because it doesn't just show up in men or males, and trying to be also neutral there with being inclusive, diversity, equity, and inclusive. The being an overly nice person and kind of doing that consistently and getting yourself in situations that are not productive for you is kind of what we're looking to focus on, more so talking to the listeners than you specifically, Nicole. So I would like to go to our first kind of piece here about people who have that nice person syndrome that you kind of encounter in the work that you do. What does that look like? Like how do you tend to see them being and presenting and showing up to talk with you?
Yeah, I definitely, it really can vary. And I think you probably see it in your work as well. There
Yeah.
can be a spectrum of this, right? Like it can be someone who, throughout a relationship or throughout a marriage has always been the person that said yes, 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 in the sense of done everything, and then perhaps it gets to a point where they no longer feel respected for what they've done. They no longer feel appreciated. And it can be this point of no return. And sometimes with that as well, I notice that, the person that says yes, 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 like I'll do this, 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 and this, they aren't as great as
Mm.
communicating in terms of, hey, I'm doing all the household work and I also work full time. I also, I'm doing all this stuff. Like, can we like divide tasks here, divide and conquer, maybe just get a break for a little. I think that that's part of it too. You can, not so much when I first am talking to them sometimes, but as a matter can progress, I can see these points of communication where there was clearly a breakdown,
Mm.
and that perhaps didn't get addressed, and then you get this point of no return. And I so there's a few individual types in my mind talking about it in this way, and then certainly I'll even see it, when they're communicating with me, right? It's like, oh, I'll do that right away. It's like, that's okay. You don't need to do it right away. It's fine, right? It's like they're always trying to make sure that everyone's taken care of, and then they might fall last,
Yeah.
right? I'll make sure that, the kids have everything they need, that they have everything they need. And it may even just be, I was asked to do it, I'm going to do it. And sometimes it's a matter of taking a breath, taking a minute, being mindful and thinking, wait, should I even be doing this? Right? This is something that I will make your life a lot easier, but it's actually going to make my life a lot harder. I'm going to
Mm.
have to, put these other things aside, right? Because, sometimes saying yes to things means you're saying no to other things as
100%.
well. So that's a lot of where I kind of see those personality types. And it's always people, and the thing is most of the time when they're doing it, they seem completely happy that they're doing it. And it's either because they're not realizing that type of personality can kind of lead to burnout,
Mm.
or like I said, some of these negative effects eventually in terms of feeling resentful, disrespected, or they just really don't mind doing it, and they just take on this extra work.
Yes,
uh,
you are like preaching. I'm like so excited. You're on a flow. And I was like, you're hitting all of the points that are like my jam to talk about. So I can do it, but do I actually want to do it? Right. Like
right,
just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, could, have to, would, all of the words that don't create any actual action that are detrimental to us. Right. And so we hear
right,
this term boundary setting, and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Really, what that means, the essence of it, at least from my perspective, is to negotiate what you want in a situation and make your needs and desires presentable to the individual. They make their wants and needs presentable to you. And now you both have each other's pictures, understanding of each other's pictures in your heads. Then you get to the workable compromise. And that's the piece that it's like, well, I want this. Okay, fine. You can have this. That means I'll put what I want on the shelf. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for that. Like, there are certain things that recently I was talking to a client who, hopefully this doesn't end in a divorce and I'll be able to help them get through it. But one client wants a cat, partner doesn't want the cat, right? And so how do you have that conversation? One or the other does not get what they want, unless there's like some extenuating circumstances like allergies, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you want a cat and your partner has allergies, well, you kind of can't have a cat. Like your partner's going to suffer through life because of your desires. Like that's not an equal, weighing out of a workable compromise. But there are no allergies. One of the things, partner who doesn't want the cat just doesn't want destroyed furniture. That's totally understandable, right? Like, so let's talk about that. There's a workable compromise in there. And the piece about the workable compromise is it's literally the skill of having a conversation with another person who wants something different than you. And it's unique to the individual or the couple or the people that are in that whatever relationship it might be. It doesn't have to be an intimate relationship. It could be roommates. It could be siblings. It could be friends. It could be adult children. It could really be any kind of communication relationship together. And again, for listeners, it's the structure of the communication is kind of, we can, that's a whole nother conversation for a different episode. But how that turns out is unique to the experience, the situation, the topic, right? The people and how they're showing. There's so many, there's no book that's going to give you all of the answers of what you want. You have to ask and know and crave for what you want. And that is the biggest piece to being the yes person. It's okay to be the yes person with boundaries, right? It's okay to be that person that helps and takes care of. At some point, there needs to be a being taken care of as well. Or like you said, Nicole, you said burnout and resentment. That burnout and resentment is not your fault as the yes person, but there is parts of it that that resulted in your resentment that were your decisions, right? And that ownership of those decisions are really, really important.
Yeah. Interesting to hear your perspective, because obviously, like in my personal life, I think, sometimes we interact with couples often, right? Who may or may do this stuff, but in professionally, I'm at the point where, some people didn't do that work. So it's good to see your perspective, and I feel a little bit validated that when I kind of see it at the other end, that you're kind of working with those people, because, to your point, I think sometimes even, what that boundary isn't even, might be said, but perhaps the why, right? Isn't properly communicated. And I think sometimes that's, especially in, an intimate relationship where you have, the presumably love and these deep feelings for that person, whatever they're asking for, if you think it's stupid, you might just blow it off. But if you know why, right, and this is someone you care about, you're probably going to try a little bit harder. And so that's something that kind of I've noticed as well, kind of down the road. It's like, but did you tell them why? Or, or even, during the process, you get the communications and it's like, well, think about it. If you started this way, would you have known X, Y, and Z, and kind of trying to craft some better communications again for down the road when
totally
people like us may or may not be around.
Right. And if you genuinely think whatever the thing is that the person is asking is stupid, then say it is stupid, but clarify you're not calling them stupid, right? If you think their idea is stupid, then cool, think their idea is stupid, but be respectful to the human you're talking to, and don't then try to, because they're going to hear it's stupid and take that as themselves because they're emotionally invested in whatever they're saying. And so that ability to hear each other out is super important, and not take things personally. Again, that's a whole nother hour-long conversation that I will not get into, but this is this stuff is so juicy. I just love having these conversations.
Well, I mean, and so I'm not, a therapist. I'm not a coach. I don't have any, psychological training whatsoever. besides, some college and high school classes, but I do find human behavior and psychology so fascinating.
Yeah.
And I do think it is a disservice when you're working in certain fields, probably most fields, but especially with family law, to not appreciate the impact of psychology, human behavior, on the process with your client, with the other side. Having that appreciation is important. So I could listen to people like you all day talk about this stuff, because it's a lot of times like, oh, I've seen an example of that, and now I know this term or this word. So I think it's so fascinating, even though I certainly don't have any real training in it, but sometimes it's you just see these examples, and eventually they start to form these patterns, and then you can listen to people like you talk about this stuff and have a term for it, or kind of know this overarching theory that allows you to better identify it and work with clients moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that speaks, so I'm going to kind of sell you a little bit here. Like, if you're shopping for attorneys, don't just go to like the number one recommended attorney or attorney place in your area. Like, interview your attorneys, because clearly, as you were just saying, Nicole, you genuinely care about the human and their experience, and it's not just a transactional thing. And the challenge with legally or working with the law is like emotionless. And so sometimes it doesn't take into account some of the considerations that might deserve to be considered in different situations, because the law is what it is. And so it's awesome to have an attorney that can really take your emotional experience, your emotional desires, what you're actually craving, what you might be craving but might not be realistic to have, right? And really helping you figure that out. And then taking your experience with the emotionless piece of being an attorney and bringing it together. Like, if I'm going to work with an attorney, or really any professional, you damn well better be able to understand who I am as a human so that you can best serve me. And so it's clear that you're somebody who is desiring to best understand your clients and serve them in the ways that they need versus the way you want or think they should be served. Obviously, there's a little bit of both, but
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly, we always tell, whether they're, there's clients or, people who call, especially with family law, we're going to get into some of your most personal events, into your finances. So, whoever you engage, you want to make sure that you feel super comfortable with them, just like you would a doctor or someone else.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about a lot of personal stuff for an extended period of time. So definitely, I always encourage people, if they want to talk to a few people, great. If they think we hit it off right away and they want to engage us, that's fine. But I certainly never take offense if someone is shopping around, because to your point, it's someone that you need to be comfortable with, sees the case the way that you do. And to your point, I think it's like probably a broken record to some of my clients. It's like, we advise, you decide, right? We're the attorneys, we give the advice, but it's your case, you make the decisions. But there is a time where you need to kind of provide that perspective, and to your point, know your client. Part of customer service, I think, especially in the legal field, is knowing how to communicate with your client and communicate with however, whether they tell you right away or what works best for them. Maybe it's gonna be a bad decision and you've already advised them and they want to do it anyways, but it's a decision that does, it's a Thursday or Friday. It's a decision that doesn't need to get done on a Thursday or Friday. So why don't you sleep on it, right? Like, think about it over the weekend and get back to it, because you, as an attorney, you do need to be those guardrails on some of this stuff.
Absolutely. Yes. And so the next piece, and why I think first off, why I've had you on the podcast, because I thought it was super important. I've talked with many attorneys, and not all of them have that deeper understanding or desire to understand the human. And so one of the main things that I always was curious when meeting with attorneys is, do you ask people when you're interviewing them or when they're interviewing you, like, have you tried anything else? Have you tried therapy? Have you tried a support group? Have you tried something before you've come to me? And I think it shows the respect that you have for the person and their experience, and not just, your business, side of you, or the business you work for. I think it speaks highly of being respectable to the person's situation. So share with us a little bit about how, if somebody were to come to you and they hadn't tried anything, and what they've shared with you seems like they could try something, where do you how do you navigate that conversation?
Yeah, so yeah, it's, certainly I have kind of a checklist of questions and intake process depending on the type of case it is.
Mm.
And admittedly, like, have you been to therapy? Have you done couples counseling? Isn't on that checklist, but there's certainly times where, based off of what they might have told, my assistant beforehand, so some notes I already have, or, in the conversation, you can kind of gather where they are in the process. And so sometimes it might just be as easy as asking, so are you calling today because something's been filed? There are certain questions like that that are arguably neutral, but they'll give you a little bit of an idea of where they are, mentally as well as in the process. So, has anything been filed? Has anyone brought up the D word, divorce, right?
Mm.
And so that kind of gives you a headspace of where it is. And I think a lot of times that gives, people the ability to say, I actually don't want a divorce. And I've had numerous people said that to me. I actually don't want a divorce, but, he or she brought it up. I think I need to know my options, or I've been served. I think this is premature. I think we should go to therapy. And so those type of situations, or they might just say, I don't know, I'm thinking about it. And I just wanted to talk to someone to see what my options are, and what makes sense, what is the landscape out there, right? Like, what would I be getting myself into? And certainly when those type of conversations come up, I will say, have you guys tried counseling? Have you been doing this? And then you'll hear some of that. And if they say, no, we haven't, but I want to, I'll say, then ask him or her if they want to go. And, if you guys are able to work it out, great. If not, and you think we would be helpful, you have my number, you have my email, call anytime, email anytime, and we can, start that process up. So it really is fact specific and situation specific in terms of when I bring it up. But certainly if there is a hesitation, or if there's someone that says that, I'll suggest it. That being said, sometimes, in New Hampshire, if someone wants to get divorced, they're going to get divorced, right? They're not going to be held to do it in most instances. So,
Yeah.
It can depend, but certainly I've had cases before where we've been in the divorce process for a long time, and people have spent money on attorneys that they can't get back. And then they reconcile. It's rare, at least in my experience, it's rare, but I much rather have them try as best they can before they get into that position,
Right.
because once the attorneys get involved, there's just fees pile up, and that money can definitely be better spent by getting split up between the parties, going to 529 plan, something, right? So certainly if there's an ability for reconciliation, I think it's important. I've had clients or I shouldn't say clients, but I've had people who have called, and those conversations have occurred, and I've heard back from them, maybe a couple months later. Certainly we've had a couple that have come back years later. So, give or take, but then there's others we never hear back from. And whether it's because they were able to reconcile, which I think is probably always the goal, or, they've decided to go with other counsel. But yeah, I do think that that's something that, if it's appropriate in the context, to bring up and see if it's an option.
Absolutely. There's going to be times where you're not going to be able to, like, it wouldn't, if someone's like, there's papers already filed, I've already been served, like, you can ask, but there's like, it's kind of like right at that point, things are already kind of in motion. So it would be weird, but that's a technicality in the conversation, more so than like, and again, speaking to you as an attorney, you do a really great job with making sure you're, again, caring to the person's situation versus just seeing it in the black and white way that you might see the law, or that attorneys tend to have to communicate the law, because again, it is an emotionless way of being. Our world kind of has emotionless, ways of participating in the law. So I love that you're skilled at making those distinctions. I want to go to the third place. And I am looking at my notes here. If you get to a place where you're ready for the divorce, like, and really they've either tried therapy or they've already come to you and they already have the papers are being served and the process is kind of started. At that point, what does it kind of look like? And again, remember, this is not you're not getting attorney services here. Like, there's a huge disclaimer around what she's about to say, but I think it's important to educate people on what that process might kind of look like. Like, what's the conversation that you have when people call you and are curious?
Sure. Yeah. So just general advice, and certainly, based upon individual circumstances, things get tailored differently. Certainly, if anyone really is looking to get involved in the process or have any of that, I would certainly suggest calling an attorney where you can talk about, the facts of your specific case and see what might be best for you from a strategic point. And certainly this is all kind of New Hampshire stuff, but yeah, if someone's been served, and they call us and they want to engage, there's no, certainly when people have been served, the process has started. If they still do think there's time to save it, a lot of times that discussion is, you can ask, you can see, but once you're in the court process, deadlines start running. So you want to make sure you're kind of doing double duty there by preserving your rights, making sure you don't, you're answering what you're supposed to be answering, you're meeting your court deadlines. So once that process gets started, it depends on where they are, because there's certain deadlines for when you need to appear, essentially tell the court you want to participate, and perhaps answer if you want to do that. So essentially respond to that initial pleading. But it really depends. A lot of times when a case comes in, it's a matter of, are there temporary issues that need to get resolved, need to get dealt with? If there's an attorney on the other side, if there's no temporary issues, do you have an idea of where you want these things to go, right? Like, do you have an idea of what you want it to look like, with who's going to be responsible for the kids when, how the kids are going to go back from house to house? Do you have an idea of what support's going to be needed and to who, from a child support, alimony, and then your stuff, right? The property division, how is that going to get divided? And again, depending on the client, that looks different. I call it like an initial divorce packet that I send over to my divorce clients. If it's parenting, it's much more pared down because you don't have to deal with alimony, you don't have to deal with property division. But some people want all the information, so I will send them all the court forms, even though I don't always use the court forms, so they understand what issues the court is going to want to talk about, what we need to not decide right now, but in the back of your mind, think about how these things are going to operate, how you want your family to look after this process is all over. Get some of those goals in mind. And then the immediate stuff, sometimes people want to get divorced right away. And we talk about that sometimes. And normally that person is on the other side from someone who really needs the process, right? So they want to get to A to Z this quickly. Now. And the other person wants to get to A to Z like this, because they need they need those other letters, they need the process, they need to be able to feel heard. For whatever reason, the marriage is breaking down. And so, it's one of those things, if you want to get it done right away, like, be mindful, take a breath, because if you want to get it done right, that takes time. And depending on the assets involved, the income involved, there's some data collection. That tends to be, that's kind of a very high overload. I probably just dumped a lot of
No, it's all really important.
But yeah, really, when you first start the process, if you're answering a petition, or if you want to file, the biggest piece is a lot of biographical information, general overviews under each of those kind of 4 boxes, we call it, so what you're asking for in any petition or response. And then a lot of data collection. There's certain documents you have to exchange, and then depending on the assets, again, depending on the income, you might need some more information from that. And once you're in a place to get that data, you have a better idea of what things look like to really start talking about the issues. And certainly if there's temporary needs, whether it's issues going on if people are in the same house, or certain bills need to get paid, someone needs some temporary support, those take priority. But a lot of times if you can keep the status quo well, it's just getting that data exchange so that you can move forward and try to get some final resolution. New Hampshire is pretty progressive in the sense of you're pretty much, unless there's issues of domestic violence, and the person who's been abused doesn't want to go to mediation and can't have those, some safeguards to that process, the court's going to expect you to go to mediation, even on temporary issues. Certainly, it's the quickest way to get issues resolved is to agree, because our courts are pretty backed up as well. So that tends to be the expectation, especially if two attorneys are on the case, because we know you can get scheduled for a temporary hearing, or you can get scheduled for a hearing on other stuff, but the court's immediately going to ask you if you guys have mediated. And if you haven't, they're going to want a good reason. And they're probably going to make you do it, even if you've tried it before. Right. So it adds a different context as well, because we kind of know what we're working towards. We're working to kind of get this resolution that both parties have buy-in to, have some control over. Right. One of our judges used to say, the legal system is not designed to deal with family law issues, but it's the best we have. And so if you really want to have some control over it, certainly if you want to try to do some creative stuff, the best way to deal with that is to agree with. And most do. Most cases in New Hampshire settle. So
yeah, good. That was a very quick breakdown of I'm sure like a couple hour or at least an hour long conversation with people who are calling and asking questions. And the key piece to this is those of you who are listening who are like, what did she just say? If you have questions, you can reach out to Nicole and we'll share that information with you in a little bit. But the important piece is we don't have, if you're listening, you're like trying to figure out for yourself, what does this mean for you? We don't have your detailed information, or Nicole doesn't have your detailed information. So she can't answer or offer any guidance in any way, shape, or form with those, because she doesn't have that information. So a lot of what you just said was the black and white parts to the work that you have to do. And then as the person shares the data with you, you kind of can trickle in and make it not black and white. You can make it personal and emotional and not emotionless. So if you have questions, or if someone would like to reach out to you, where can they find you? Website, email, social media.
So I work at Champagny. We're a law firm that's headquartered in Manchester.
Can you spell that?
Yes. So SHEEHANPHINNEY.
Awesome. Yes.
I'm better with paper and pen, so I'm like visualizing it in my head.
Okay.
So if you Google that, our website comes up and you can find me easily there. Also, if you Google it with my name, Nicole Forbes, you'll probably find my LinkedIn, which I post regularly on. I do have social media accounts. My Instagram and Facebook is NH Divorce Lawyer. That's my handle. And then my Twitter handle is NH Divorce Law. And so I post pretty regularly on there. And certainly a lot more on LinkedIn, because my other accounts are pretty directed towards family law. But that's kind of my information only type content piece. Certainly my website has my direct dial. It has my email address. And if anyone has any questions, or they think we might be a good fit, they can certainly reach out, and we can start that initial process.
I love it. I am so excited. I significantly appreciate that you are here. I look forward to continuing the conversation. And obviously my goal is to never have to send someone to you, but I'm so grateful that I have somebody who I can trust. Whereas if we did everything that we could do in the work that I do, that I can genuinely send them to you, knowing that they will be taken care of and treated with humanity. So I appreciate that in you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.